I am the representative provincially for the riding of Vancouver-Langara, which is located in South Vancouver and shares the ancestral and traditional territory of the Musqueam First Nation. And when my parents came from Hong Kong in the 50s and 60s, I first lived at the top end of this riding. It's located in a very important area of the city, again sharing the lands with the Musqueam First Nation, but an area of the city which is quite diverse by itself in terms of a very strong South Asian community. My office is located in the heart of the Punjabi market. The Chinese Canadian community in terms of immigrants coming from Hong Kong, like my parents, mainland China, Taiwan. There's the Taiwanese Cultural Center located in my riding. We have the Joy Kagawa House, and which is a very important place to remember the experiences of Japanese Canadians in the internment and the systemic racism that was involved in that action. I also have the Jewish Community Center, which is a place that I went to preschool when I was in my early years, and also a school that I went to, which is Vancouver College, a Catholic boys' school. When my parents came from Hong Kong, my father lived in Chinatown in the summers, and the local church helped him find his first job as a janitor at St. Paul's Hospital. And I know that in his journey to become a pharmacist and own and operate some drugstores on the east side of Vancouver, and I grew up on weekends working in those drugstores, that he experienced a different journey. He came at a time which was only 6 years after the Chinese Exclusion Act was repealed. And of course, that act was repealed in 1947 after the Second World War, when Canada became a signatory to the United Nations Charter of Human Rights. That was a time from 1923, which banned Chinese immigration to Canada for many years and separated many Chinese immigrant men from their families. Because we know that we look at the history of our country and of this province, in British Columbia, putting the pressure on the federal government, along with other provinces, brought in place and put in place that act, which followed, of course, the original Chinese Immigration Act in 1885, which imposed a head tax on people coming from China who wanted to work. And many of these Chinese immigrants worked, of course, to help build the Canadian Pacific Railway. They worked on farms and in logging operations, and they opened up stores. And it was this influx of Chinese immigrants which caused a reaction in Canada by many others in our communities. And it's that history that I learned about when I went on to volunteer in Vancouver's Chinatown in the late 1980s. I worked with the Human Rights Committee of the Chinese Benevolent Association of Vancouver, interviewing payees and their families about the head tax. And in that time, we saw many families, of course, that talked about their history with Canada and their separation from their families and their hardships. And I believe it was a very important time in history for us to recognize the restrictions that were placed based on race and national origin that weren't actually fully embraced until 1967. This period demonstrates the importance of education. It realizes that we all recognize that we're not that far removed from the darker parts of our Canadian history. And of course, as was mentioned by others already here, we've seen a significant rise in the face of COVID-19 of anti-Asian hate here in British Columbia. The Vancouver Police Department has reported a staggering 717% increase in Asian hate crimes in 2020. And of course, we know that there's global tensions here, but we also know that we have to build a more inclusive society. And that includes standing up against incidents of racism. We saw that with the ancient Musqueam village and burial ground system that was vandalized recently in my constituency. We've seen anti-Semitic symbols and swastikas and white power words utilized in a local park in my riding, Riverview Park. And all of these terrible acts of hate are sad reminders that we have so much work more to do to fight racism in our society. And I know that in our journeys and in gatherings like this, that we recognize the importance of our diversity and the positive build a common society, one that breaks down the barriers. So that's why I think in terms of Islam Unravelled and the efforts that you have to go across boundaries of communities, to bring together various religions and ethnocultural communities, it's such important work because we have to break down those silos. We have to create a greater understanding of each other in terms of our traditions, our beliefs, our faiths, but also recognize that we can do a lot together. And I know with the combined efforts of those leaders who are gathered here today, the people who are watching this program and all the other programs that this organization puts on, we continue to increase the greater public awareness of our history. We recognize that with the efforts of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and even the activity and the actions to be taken with UNDRIP in our province, that we can right the wrongs of Indigenous peoples in our province's history, that we can continue to stand up for a more tolerant society. And I hope that with efforts like this, that the journeys that we found, or each of us have stories in terms of our own family system, parents and our grandparents have sacrificed to build a better future here. And so I hope to join with you in further discussions and further efforts to help break down those barriers and to have a more inclusive and stronger society. Thank you.